In 2024, a Colombian man was seen wandering through Bristol in the UK with two unusually heavy suitcases. Concerned onlookers tried to help the flustered man, who simply claimed to be looking for a hotel. But when they spotted a red substance seeping from one of the suitcases, the man quickly fled, leaving the suitcases behind. What authorities would find inside would traumatise every officer and juror who came near the investigation. This is the haunting case of Yostin Mosquera. This case begins in Shepherd's Bush in London, where best friends Albert Alfonso and Paul Longworth shared a home. Described as a settled and affectionate couple, they had lived together for 20 years, and although they married in February 2023, they later separated, though they remained inseparable companions and continued living together as best friends. Albert, who was 62, was a swimming instructor training to become a lifeguard. Originally from France, he moved to the UK to manage hotels before finding work at the luxury estate 375 Kensington High Street. It was there that he met Paul. The two bonded almost instantly, sharing the experience of having been fostered as children. Paul was a 71-year-old, recently retired handyman and was known as a typical Irish bloke. Because Paul was dyslexic, he relied on Albert for many day-to-day tasks, but they viewed each other as their everything, their rocks and their world. Albert also had an interest in extreme sex, something Paul was aware of but did not participate in. Nonetheless, he respected this part of Albert's life. It was through this interest that Albert met 35-year-old Yostin Mosquera from Medellin in Colombia. A former member of the military in Bogota, he was more recently known as an online adult performer. He posted many videos online of himself performing sexual acts for which he received money from customers, one of which was Albert. Their connection began back in 2012, when Albert and Yostin engaged in explicit Skype calls. What started as online encounters gradually evolved into a transactional relationship. And by 2017, Albert was paying Yostin for sexual videos, content that grew increasingly extreme over time, drawing the two men deeper into a dynamic that would eventually have devastating consequences. In 2022, Albert financed Yostin's first trip outside of his home country of Colombia, paying for him to visit the UK. Albert and Paul welcomed Yostin into their home, where he stayed for several weeks before returning to his wife and son. Despite the distance, their connection continued over the next 2 years. Between 2022 and 2024, Albert sent Yostin 72 payments, totaling around $7,735 or £5,800. The three later reunited, this time in Cartagena, Colombia, in March 2024. Albert and Paul travelled to Cartagena and also covered Yostin's travel costs so he could also join them. The trio spent a couple of weeks together, documenting their time with photographs. But just 4 months after these seemingly wholesome photos, the lives of Albert and Paul would be brutally cut short. Just 3 months later, in June 2024, Albert and Paul invited Yostin back to London. They considered him a friend, but behind his calm exterior, Yostin was plotting something horrific. He had much darker intentions that formed even before he boarded his flight. June 2024 arrived and Albert and Paul warmly welcomed Yostin again. He was treated like family with a trip to Brighton, where Yostin experienced a ride on a zip line. They visited Madame Tussauds, rode on an open-top bus and had a scenic boat trip on the River Thames. Yostin was even given English lessons to help improve his language skills, as well as a gym membership, all of which were arranged and funded by Albert. But no amount of generosity, sightseeing or kindness could change what Yostin had planned. Behind the laughter and shared experiences, his sinister intentions remained unchanged. On Monday, the 8th of July, 2024, Albert left for work early as usual, leaving Paul and Yostin alone in their flat. At around 12:30 p.m, CCTV from across the street captured Yostin standing in the window, then closing the curtains. Investigators believe that this was the moment he carried out his first attack. Yostin grabbed a hammer from the flat and reportedly placed a plastic bag over Paul's head before delivering brutal blows. Once Paul was dead, Yostin hid his body in the divan space under Paul's bed and made basic attempts to clean the area before Albert returned from work. Later that afternoon, CCTV showed Albert returning home with Yostin. It's unclear where Yostin went prior to this, but once inside, Albert set up cameras in his bedroom to record a sexual session, something they often did. But this session would turn deadly. Footage reviewed by authorities later revealed Yostin performing sexual acts on Albert before grabbing a knife hidden under a tablecloth. He then carried out a second brutal attack, stabbing Albert multiple times across the upper body and head, before cutting his throat. During the attack, he chillingly asked Albert, "Do you like it?" Albert had been blindfolded at the time, so he was caught completely unaware of what was to come. Afterwards, Yostin was seen celebrating, dancing and singing in apparent pleasure at what he had done. He then attempted to send £4,000 to his Colombian bank account, but when that failed, he withdrew hundreds of pounds from Albert's accounts from local ATMs. After the murders, Yostin dismembered the bodies of Albert and Paul, removing their heads and legs, and in Paul's case, his hands and feet also. He placed the torsos and legs in 2 separate suitcases and began planning how to conceal the bodies. On the 10th of July 2024, he enlisted a stranger, a man with a van, to drive him and the suitcases from their West London flat to Bristol, a distance of 116 miles or 186 kilometres. The driver dropped him near the Mall pub close to the Clifton Suspension Bridge, which was Yostin's intended disposal site. Realising just how heavy the suitcases were, Yostin called a taxi to carry them the final 321 metres to the other side of the bridge, a distance leaving the taxi driver questioning if it was even worth the fare. During this time, locals noticed him struggling with the heavy suitcases, with one even jokingly asking, "Have you got a body in there?"
My son, who's outgoing, said, "Wow man, that's a very heavy suitcase. What you got in there, a body?"
A darkly ironic comment with a horrifying truth. Once he was on the bridge, Yostin yet again attracted the attention of passers-by. It's believed his intent was to throw the suitcases from the Clifton Suspension Bridge, but it's heavily monitored by surveillance cameras and bridge staff. Locals quickly noticed he was acting really strange. Finding someone on a bridge with 2 enormous and clearly unusually heavy suitcases is going to raise concerns, especially when one of them is leaking a red substance. A Spanish-speaking cyclist approached Yostin to ask questions. He asked if he needed help with his enormous suitcases and if bridge staff could open the suitcases. He replied he was just looking for a hotel and denied the need for the suitcases to be opened, claiming that it was simply just some car parts inside which were leaking oil. But the locals weren't convinced.
We're going to need some police up here quite urgently, I think. We had a gentleman up here who was dragging a case behind him. The case is broken and it looks like it's really heavy and there's blood coming out of it. He said it was car parts, oil. It doesn't smell of that at all. We're convinced it's blood.
A torch was shone on the suitcases. The substance looked unmistakably like blood, and Yostin fled the scene, leaving the suitcases behind. The cyclist who was filming the whole ordeal followed Yostin up Burwell's Road, but he managed to flee after pushing him off his bike. Meanwhile, police made the most traumatic discovery of their careers. As we well know, the decapitated and dismembered torsos of both Albert Alfonso and Paul Longworth were revealed. A luggage tag on a suitcase linked back to the couple's flat in London, where a search began, revealing even more disturbing evidence. evidence that would confirm the murders were in fact premeditated and also revealed a motive. Yostin's laptop in the flat revealed a chilling search history, some of which was before he even left Colombia. Searches inquiring the value of Albert and Paul's home, and others related to UK serial killers, with Jack the Ripper being a main focus. He likely considered the value of their home as vast, so conjured up a way to get rid of the couple. With this also came research into chest freezers, very similar to a chest freezer that was actually found in the hallway of the home, blocking the entrance to the bathroom. CCTV footage revealed Yostin had this freezer delivered the day after the murders, after looking up the translation from Spanish to English for a freezer to be delivered to the flat. Inside this freezer, officers found the missing body parts, including Albert and Paul's heads. The bloodstained hammer and knife were also found close by. The disturbing and gruesome video of Yostin murdering Albert was also uncovered, as well as many previous sexual videos of the two. Searches from the day of the murders were also found, such as where to hit someone on the head to kill them, and after murdering Paul, he searched how long does it take for a body to start decomposing. Another sickening and completely unexpected finding on his laptop was over 6,000 indecent images of children, 1,500 of which were Category A, or also known as the worst possible. But this killer and now known PDF file was on the run. They managed to track Yostin's phone number, which revealed his phone had been turned off on the 11th of July. Assuming he would attempt to flee the country, police notified all transport hubs, but when Yostin turned his phone back on just after midnight on the 13th of July, they were shocked to realise he was actually still in Bristol. He was tracked moving into the Hotwells area of Bristol, with CCTV capturing him passing a pizza takeaway, while wearing only one shoe, which he allegedly lost while escaping on the 10th of July. He was later arrested outside the train station.
I've got a hand, mate.
Go.
Yeah. I can say the words then. I need secure.
Go.
Stay down, John. Yeah.
Oh my God. What happened?
Secure.
On your side, mate.
What happened?
Move your legs out to the front. Sit up.
At this time, mate, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder. You don't have to say anything, but may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned, something you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand?
No. What?
You are currently under arrest for murder, okay?
What's your name, mate?
What?
What's your name? Nombre.
Jot.
Jot.
Yeah.
Jot or Joss?
Jot.
Surname? Jot what?
Jot. Mosquera.
Mosquera?
Yeah.
One officer said, "I am confident we would have identified pretty quickly who our suspect was, but then you've got a suspect that's in Colombia, which would take years to get him extradited back to the UK, if ever. He could have committed almost the perfect murder." At trial, Yostin pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of Albert, and despite the mountain of evidence against him, he pleaded not guilty to the murder of Paul, and he told a very different story. He claimed to have heard Paul and Albert arguing in the bathroom, so Albert take Paul to the bedroom while putting on some black gloves. Then after hearing some noises, Albert emerged with the gloves covered in blood. He says Albert then took a shower, during which time Yostin questioned if Paul was even still alive. He said that he then felt frightened and feared that he was next, that he lost control and acted in self-defense, resulting in him killing Albert. Obviously, the court saw straight through his lies and rejected his claims. Albert simply had no reason at all to murder his best friend Paul. He also told the court that Albert raped him every day, that he threatened his family back home, and that he himself didn't take any enjoyment in the extreme sexual acts. Psychiatric reports were conducted, which concluded Yostin had no mental health issues at the time of the murders. Doctors noted that he was capable of being charming and charismatic, but he would bore easily and lie. They described him as self-centered and lacked empathy, a trait that a doctor remarked may have come during a possible childhood trauma that Yostin claimed to have experienced. He alleged at the age of 10 and again at the age of 14, he witnessed the deaths of children. Although he could be dishonest at times, they found no reason to suggest this claim was untrue, and said the experience may have brutalised him. The jurors also had the horrendous task of watching the footage of the murder take place. After the first trial, one of the jurors handed the judge a note wishing to be discharged, stating that they couldn't face watching the video again. The impact that this footage had not only on the authorities involved, but also the jurors, was immense. Autopsies showed that Paul had died from 13 severe blunt force traumas to the head with a hammer, and also had wounds on his hands, showing that he had tried to defend himself. Albert had passed from 22 stab wounds. Although the murders were clearly premeditated, the judge who referred to Yostin as an odd man and an incompetent criminal had to take into consideration the fact that he had no prior criminal history in either Colombia or the UK. On the 24th of October 2025, Yostin Mosquera was found guilty of the murders of both Paul Longworth and Albert Alfonso. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 42 years. He also received an additional 16 months for the possession of indecent images of children. Yostin showed no emotion while receiving his sentence. He just smiled at the court while leaving. 2 men were murdered in the home where they happily lived together for years, by a man they considered a friend, a man they welcomed into their home with warm and open hearts. But he took advantage of their generosity and stole their lives in hopes of financial gain. Albert and Paul, long-term companions who shared a home and life together, were remembered for their kindness, humour, and the deep bond that they shared.